must surrender immediately. Do not attempt to claim supreme authority. Your reign of terror is over.
Come on, Bernie! You can't do this forever! This is Gareth Jones on Speed, boldly going where no Gareth Jones on Speed has gone before, but more on that later in the programme. Very pleased to say that we are Core 8, the full complement of speedsters are here. Zog.
Hello.
And Richard.
Hello.
How you doing, guys?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Good, very good.
You enjoying this new 21st century of something else?
11 years of it now.
I'm
feeling it's bedded in.
used to the idea.
I was shocked to find out that 1991 was 20 years ago yesterday.
Yeah.
Really?
I had a conversation like this with a friend of mine in the pub the other night where she tried to claim that in fact the years 2000 to 2009 didn't exist. They couldn't possibly have done because 1991, for example, wasn't 20 years ago.
No, that's right.
Because that would mean that we're getting old.
Yeah. That would mean that I'm
know,
50 this year, which is impossible. Because look at me, I'm the body of a 49-year-old. Yeah.
I kind of like the way your friend was thinking, though, I have to say. I think her argument would have found some sympathy. But
She had quite a lot of red wine by that point, though. So let's not launch it on this as some kind of scientific endeavour when, in truth, it was
an alcohol.
We're going to talk about the future in some way in this programme today, but I want to talk about the immediate future and a bit of news which broke this week that Kimi Räikkönen is going to NASCAR. Yeah. I tweeted that this makes about as much sense as... It just doesn't make sense. Kimi in NASCAR. What?
It just struck me as being a little bit like, from my prejudice perspective against NASCAR and such basic forms of racing, it just seemed like, I don't know, Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci going back to painting and decorating.
Which he did do, didn't he? He had one of those little...
He did ceilings, you know.
Yeah, one of those little Fiorino vans that he used to drive around.
Or Stravinsky joining AC/DC.
Well, you see, here's the thing. If you're going to use that analogy, AC/DC have their merits. I'm not a particular fan, but I quite admire what they do.
All right.
Yeah.
And I think it requires a skill and a performance in just the same way as, say, being in the London Philharmonic does. And by the same token, I think that NASCAR is more complicated and more potentially more interesting and more skillful than we would maybe give it credit for when we just assume it's driving round and round in a big oval for the most part.
I love oval racing. I don't watch the IndyCar these days, I'm afraid, but I was a habitual watcher of Champ Cars or Kart when they had, 30% of their races were on ovals. And they were some of the most exciting races. We've been to an oval race together. We went
Darlington.
to
Rockingham
together. And you can watch the game play out very much as in the same way as Formula One. There's a kind of, you've got to be on the same lead lap as everyone else in the last lap to then win the race. And
you've left that sound effects CD on, by the way.
Oh, the one of the police sirens.
Chase number 3, by my reckoning.
Oh,
anyway,
the best bit is when the doorbell rings in a few minutes. And
it's
pizza
delivery
sounds like someone's
seven,
bringing you a pizza. Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's in no way because we just left the windows open because it's a beautiful evening.
Yeah.
So NASCAR, NASCAR, I think there's a lot of skill involved in NASCAR. But it's not just NASCAR. It's not that big, rumbly, vaguely road car shaped NASCAR that we might think of.
This is trucks,
NASCAR.
Isn't it? This
trucks,
is, which is
but not trucks,
right?
as in, yes, pickup trucks. And Raikkonen's signed up with Kyle Busch Racing, and they run Toyotas. So this is a big space framey type thing with a silhouette body on the top. Yeah. And so it's pickup trucks.
But how advanced are they under the skin? Because
they're not.
Straight up, I know nothing about NASCAR trucks.
But what they are, as far as I can work out, is they're extremely simple in principle, and then it's in the detail that people find improvements. So they're still using pushrod V8s, and they're using very, very simple chassis. But then it's all about how the team works with that. I mean, there's an interesting lesson here for Formula One. Maybe Formula One is still too complicated. And when they fiddle about with, let's put grooves in the tyres. No, let's not. Let's simplify that. Let's keep with slicks. Formula One, let's not say get rid of carbon fibre and things, but maybe Formula One is too bogged down. I mean, an electrically powered rear wing, it's like going, there's some slats over the goal at some points in a football game.
But leaving the adjustable rear wing stuff aside, because I think that is probably a bit of trickery too far, and it's a bit of a Mickey Mouse way, probably, of
I disagree.
tackling this over. Well,
You disagree? What?
well,
I think...
well, no, before we get into the DRS thing,
Yeah.
it's just the point is simply that if you want to allow people to develop the technology of a racing vehicle, as in F1, and you want this to be the top tier or one of the top tiers of motor racing, you can't hobble people too much on a lot of the technical aspects. You have to allow that freedom for people to come up with clever stuff, and for it to be more than, I think, in just the tiny detail.
I think the whole movable rear wing thing is something we should have perhaps had many years ago if they get it to work. Take a while to bed in. But simply because Formula One has a history of taking on board new technologies or any technology it can to allow you to win. You know, carbon fibre, forced induction, ground effect. There's a history of real breakthrough things. And the understanding of aerodynamics is fundamental to making a car, any car, efficient and therefore
But
quick.
there's a fundamental difference between all of those things that you mentioned and the DRS, the adjustable rear wing, which is that all of those things have potential benefit for a vehicle on the road, making it lighter, as you say, just making the aerodynamics better.
But they don't.
You are
That's the
never
thing.
going
I
to
don't think
need
they
an
do.
adjustable... Well, no, carbon fibre, using composite
yeah.
materials, absolutely.
But-
If you're developing technology that enables you to make cars lighter and stronger, that's a benefit whether you're on a race track or
it
whether
is,
you're
but
on the road.
I think the carbon fibre we're now
Making
seeing
better
in road
turbo
cars
engines.
is coming from a dedicated road car development program, which yes, actually has been pushed by McLaren now for a road car, but it's to make it feasible for mass production.
But
the
like-
F1 technique is irrelevant for road cars
No,
unless they're very, very low volume because it's such a
Okay, but
handmade,
no,
labour-intensive.
But I'm
process.
I'm not suggesting that a lot of the F1 technology is filtering down directly from F1 cars to road cars. Clearly that doesn't happen. But I am suggesting that they're generally developing technologies and techniques that are useful to the
Yeah.
rest of the
for the greater
the
good.
automotive
Sure,
industry.
it's
And a lot of the
pushing
a lot of the
mankind's,
KERS technology, for example. There will be some stuff developed there that is going to be useful to hybrid technology on road cars.
Movable aerodynamics are on road cars anyway. I mean, we've got Bentleys, we've got Audis with pop-up rear spoilers. You know, which
They've been doing that for years.
Exactly, yeah.
And this movable rear wing thing, it's a fix to make overtaking easier. Now, I'm absolutely prepared to give it a go, and if it works, if it improves the racing, then great, let's stick with it. You know, that's
Yes.
fine. But it is basically a Mickey Mouse fix
It's
for
such
a
an
bit of a problem.
inelegant solution to a problem that they haven't really tackled properly for years. And I don't know how they do, except by going completely back to basics, which it brings us back to NASCAR, I guess, because, you know, all the stuff in NASCAR is about, I can't remember what they call it, but when they weight the car, you know, they say that if you try to drive it in a straight line on a flat surface, it'll be a
it'll-
nightmare
it would
because
tend to
it's
go in a curve.
constantly trying to turn left.
it
on an
has
oval.
toe in on one side and toe out on the
Yeah,
other.
but they
and
have
stuff,
also they have
yeah.
sort of counterweights and things on one side of the car and not on the other. And that's the thing. It is actually sort of quite technical, and there are a number of things, you know, on those big oval tracks, they have spotters all around the track who are talking to the driver. So it becomes a very tactical game, and it's all about, you know, the driver being aware of who's around him and who he can get a toe off and who he's competing against. So it's more complicated than we think. That was, I suppose, my original point.
I remember we went for dinner at the British Grand Prix with the Toyota F1 team a few years ago. Do you remember
That
that?
would have been 3 years ago, was it?
Was it 3 years ago? Yeah. Glock and Trulli.
What did you
were
order?
there.
Because they went bust shortly after that, didn't they? Yes, I'll have the
It was a hell of a meal.
peacock, followed by the panda steak, please, and then some whale.
That is actually what I had. Yeah. Again, the last time I had it was when Arrows took me to dinner. If I
Oh,
remember, as well,
no,
in
kiss of
Georgia,
death.
yeah.
Do you remember that time when
I think
you...
I had the unicorn steak, actually. That was...
Oh, it's a bit sweet.
You
though,
went for
isn't it?
dinner and Leighton House offered to pay, and then what happened? You?
But anyway,
Kiss of death.
the point was that we
do
were
that.
having dinner with these wonderful people from F1, and the manager of the Toyota F1 team, whose name escapes me at this moment, said that he'd just come back from, was it Charlottesville in the States, where he'd watched a NASCAR race. Toyota were
It
represented.
could be Charlotte.
Charlotte,
in North Carolina or South
Quite
Carolina,
possibly
one of them.
somewhere in the colonies.
Yeah.
You know, where you
Over
go
there.
sometimes, yes. And he said he had hair standing up on his arms at the start of the race. They put on
Yeah.
a great show, and you know it's going to be real racing. And that he thought that Formula One was doomed because it didn't offer that kind of spectacle. And, you know, what do you know, 3 months later, Toyota
So we're
will
doomed.
pull out of F1, yeah.
It's funny, but everyone I know who's ever been to a NASCAR race, hardcore Formula One fans particularly, always come back and go, wow, That was amazing. And annoyingly, I've had the chance twice when I've been in the States to go to a NASCAR race and then not been able to go. And I'm desperate to go just to see what this is all about.
Yeah,
so I'm not ruling it out
good
because
to
I am
find out what
fascinated
Buffy's
by it. But Kimmy is in trucks. Just very quickly, because we don't really know much about this, do we? But I'll
No,
tell you
we
two
don't.
things.
No.
First of all, there's loads of NASCAR series. There's a sort of big top flight one, but then there's also smaller formulas below it, and this includes these pickup trucks. They all have the names of the series are depending on who the lead sponsor is. So Kimmy is competing in the Camping World Truck Series.
Camping World.
But it gets better, my friends.
Oh, go on. What's
Because,
this?
well, just before we started recording this, I had a little look at what's going on here. So he's done his first test this week with the Kyle Busch team that he's signed to. He's going to do selected races, blah-de-blah-de-blah. The first one will be Charlotte Motor Speedway on May the 20th, right? And on Wednesday, it was announced that
What?
Kimmy's sponsor in NASCAR, his lead sponsor, will be Perky Jerky. Which is weird, because I thought he'd be sponsored by Wall's Ice Cream, but there you go. Perky Jerky, everyone. Perky Jerky, the choice of Kimi Räikkönen.
Jimmy, baby, welcome to NASCAR. And boy, have I got some sponsorship opportunities for you. So, we got the Perky Jerky on board. That's okay. But that is just the start. Yeah. Awesome, Kimmy, awesome. So, firstly, we have Wacko Tobacco, the only chewing tobacco that makes your mouth taste like the late Michael Jackson, the king of pop. Okay, yeah. We also got Scotch Watch, the only timepiece that also dispenses real Scottish whiskey. What time is it? It's time you got an alcohol dependence, my friend. Oh, yeah. Right, yeah. Next, we have Holy Cola, the only soda drink that increases your chances of becoming the Holy Father himself, the Pope of Rome. And if that ain't enough for you, Kimmy, baby, I just sealed a deal with Holy Guacamole. It's the only chip dip that contains a vision of Lord Jesus Christ himself in every jar. Okay, I'm just gonna keep on going on. You're a great guy, and you're excited, but wait, Kimmy, baby, wait. I saved the best until last. Crack Snack, the only chocolate-coated potato chip that contains crystallized cocaine for the high that goes straight to your thighs. What do you think, Kimmy, baby? Do you want to do this, do ya? I'm going to take that as a yes.
I say, what's better than F1?
Two F1s.
That would be
the right
F2, which isn't better than F1. No. Richard, any guesses? What's
F1
better than
squared. That
I
was
don't
That's
know.
pretty good, yeah. That's more than F1. Oh, no, it isn't.
Well, unless you well, yeah.
Like some kind of monkey-controlled spacecraft that I could go around solving mysteries in.
That's pretty good.
And
Kissing
I'm
Violet
invisible.
Berlin's better than F1.
a time machine that looks like a blue police box.
Imagine. Such a thing. It's TV's Violet Berlin.
You had to say that. I'd walked into the room. I will now leave the room. And you can...
I didn't know she was there.
What would be worse is if you left the room and then Zog and I both said that as well, and then agreed
Oh,
with
that
each
would be
other.
trouble.
That would be
I'd split
extremely
the band, that would.
controversial.
Yeah. So, what is better than F1? Do you know what I reckon is better than F1?
Go on.
E1.
So you're referring to the electric F1 idea? Or, well, there have been some news stories that refer to electric F1, but it's not actually electric
yes, I
F1.
think they've got a bit carried away.
Exactly, because the story seems to be that Jean Todt and the FIA are talking to the EU about setting up an electric racing series, an open wheel series that would be run at Grand Prix and other circuits.
Yeah.
And
they've got in ex-BMW board member Gerhard. I can't pronounce his name properly.
No, it is
Anyway, who's I think got a fairly good track record of things, and it's a working committee at the moment, isn't it? I imagine they have a room with a big long table in it and lots of biscuits and those jugs of
lots
water,
of meetings.
or perhaps if it's quite posh, bottles of water, and when you arrive they've got a little cluster of glasses upside down around the base of the bottle. It's that kind of thing. But they are saying that by 2013 ideally they would like to get some kind of electric race series going that may lead to a Formula One style electric championship of some sort.
Yeah, although
Something
quite what anybody
to be
meant by
confirmed.
Formula One style, who knows?
I don't know.
Does that just mean
Cars driving
does that
around
just mean
tracks,
open
it's
wheel? Does that
Let's
just mean
tackle
anyway? But
that idea. The only reason I think E1 is better than F1 is that it uses up fewer letters, and therefore it's a Zen thing because it replaces an object but uses up less resources, so it's quantifiably
Well,
better. It's a
no,
Zen thing.
but it doesn't, because actually, technically, if you were writing it with an biro, you would use more ink.
Oh, that's the truth.
So
There's
it's a
third
little more
horizontal
profligate
line.
than F1, which could only be more economical if it was called I1.
Yeah. Or just I.
Oh. But
Yeah.
do we like the
Or just a dot.
They agreed. Anyway,
What are you doing at the weekend? Well, there's a dot race on.
so E1, let's imagine E1, right, where you've got probably 5 teams who've managed to put together vehicles to some kind of spec that is broad enough to allow people to compete. It'll have to be a mix of two things, a sort of a bunch of stock parts that can get you going so anyone can have a go, and also a rule that says, and pretty much do what you want with it to make it fantastic.
Well, does it? I mean, I could see this could work as being a very open formula, and in a way that would be probably the best way of using it to drive technology forward, if that's part of the idea.
Technology.
Or a stock formula based on chassis and engine and
Electric NASCAR.
drivetrain from a particular supplier.
That's the
Either
talk
of those
of a
could work.
communist there, sir. Get out of town. I think it is the stated position of Gareth Jones on speed, isn't it? That we all think that Formula One might be more interesting if it was sort of open season on engines.
Formula
Do
Libre.
what you want. If you want a Vankel rotary engine, go nuts. If you want a V12, have it.
Yeah.
And if that did happen, well, what if there was one team that said, all right, we're going to do an electric car, we've got some new battery technology. And then I think, going back to what we were talking about earlier on, now that is something you really could see benefiting road cars in a very immediate way, because battery technology is where electric road cars need the most help at the moment, and are sort of progressing quite rapidly. But the white heat of the cauldron of motorsport.
Swedish
The
motorsport,
motorsport is something that could really move that on a pace.
But electric motors, already clearly massively better than internal combustion engines, to put it crudely.
Well, so simple, so few parts.
And so much power for the weight.
so
And
grungy.
Instant grunt.
So much torque.
Imagine that, an electric F1 car off the line would be an thing to behold.
They would have to find
as you say,
a harder road surface.
battery technology, batteries compared to fuel tanks don't look very good in terms of energy density, how much energy you can pack into them, and they take a bit longer to fill up.
Yes.
So those are the
He's
two
coming in
things
for fuel.
you need to fix.
He's still there. He's still there. The winning driver is onto the podium. Let's just go back and see how the, I don't know, Electro Red Bull is doing. Team manager Phil Oakey still looking crestfallen there.
Together in electric
Oh,
beams.
he's tripped
That was-
over.
Oh, nice.
One thing that does slightly concern me is how they would sound, because one of the few downsides of an electric drivetrain, at least in a racing context, is you don't have that lovely internal combustion engine sound.
Well, now, I was going to move this on later, but since you bring that up, I've just been driving that Nissan Leaf, that electric car.
Does it make a sound?
Well, here's the thing. At low speed, it emits an artificial sound outside, so warn pedestrians that you're coming.
I hate this idea.
It's irritating.
What is
you
that
can turn it
sound?
off.
A hum?
Okay.
Sort of, yes.
Right.
Do you know, one of the things about that car is that in many ways it seems to have been, tuneless
thinking.
whistling. They just sampled a window cleaner.
Right, love. There you go.
Oi!
But then you kind of be looking overhead rather than looking at the road when you hit.
No, one of the things about the Leaf is, in many ways, it seems like they've very studiously tried to make it feel as normal as possible. It's just a 5-door hatchback of about the size of a Golf or a Focus. But there are a couple of things about it that seem so brilliantly Japanese that you just hope that they never get rid of them.
What like?
And, well, one of them is the noise it makes when it starts up, which I can't even describe it. It's one of those uniquely odd sort of digital noises that you'd think you'd see on TV playing an advert for soup in Tokyo, but you wouldn't have a clue what was going on. It's amazing. It's just like it's pure Japan condensed into a
Electronic
sound.
noise
Yeah,
of
electronic
some
noise.
kind.
But an electronic noise that I just don't think anyone in Europe or anywhere in the West would be capable of coming up with. It's brilliant. I wish I'd recorded it. But the other thing is the noise it makes when it drives along at low speed, which is just this irritating sort of hum that ascends with speed. You can turn it off, though. There's a switch.
Yeah, I feel quite strongly about this aspect of electric cars making noise on the road. I know everybody is adding electronic sound generators to the cars so they make noise so you can hear them more easily.
Yeah.
I hate this idea, and I just wish that instead they would come up with clever ways of using the airflow around the car to make noise.
We've talked about this before, haven't we? The
We
ocarina
have,
idea,
yeah. I just, you know, it just seems so much more interesting and sensible, and it would be more reliable.
Well, yeah,
I don't know.
because the thing, it's contrived, isn't it? These little electronic sound generators, and there's a potential that different car makers haven't all been to the same meeting, and they've got different noises, and you get this awful atonal racket
kind
on our
of
high
cacophony
streets.
of different sort of, you know, something's.
Yeah, it's oh God!
Somebody's
why the
recording
hell
them.
did Audi decide that B flat was a good sound for their low speed warning? My point actually about noise is that at higher speeds, the Leaf doesn't make an artificial noise. They deem it unnecessary
Because you've
to
got
warn
tyre
pedestrians.
noise.
Yeah, tyre noise in a petrol engine car these days is the biggest sound.
Yeah.
And in the cabin, as you accelerate at higher speed, what you get is this funny, almost like jet engine-like whistle. It's faint, but it's there. And it's one of the things that gives the car a surprising amount of personality, because you get this sort of... And it's actually quite cool.
Is that sort of transmission noise, or is it?
I think it might be the actual motor, but it's not like a vacuum cleaner noise or something. Presumably the motor is turning at
Turbine, it's moving air
many
around,
tens
those
of thousands of
rotors.
RPMs. But yeah, it's just a... Maybe it is transmission. I mean, it's not, it hasn't got a transmission in the sense of gears, because it doesn't need them. It's a single speed. It only needs drive shafts, essentially, to
What's
transmit.
the range? 100 miles, they say?
Now, I'm glad you asked me that, Gareth, because I can't remember.
I think it's 100 miles.
It's a little bit more than that, but I mean, obviously that's the claimed range. And then one of the things it does, which is very interesting, is if you push a button on the sat-nav, it shows you a map of the whole of Britain with where you are at the centre of a different coloured circle, which then delineates your
Where you could
potential range,
Projected
where you
range.
could get to.
Okay.
And it immediately threw up one of the problems, which of course we know about electric cars, is this range issue.
Range anxiety.
And yeah, range anxiety, because we were in Milton Keynes and the shading stops just south of where my dad lives. So I was thinking, well, if I wanted right now to go and see my dad in just south of Manchester, I couldn't in the way that I could in my car. However, there are ways in which they're trying to mitigate this, and one of them is that initially it'll be something like 26 Nissan dealers will be able to sell this car. Each one of them will have a fast charger, and you'll be able to pull in there. It'll do you 80% charge in about 30, 40 minutes, and they'll
That's
charge
really
it up for free. And they say by 2013, when they start building this car up in Washington, in Sunderland, every Nissan garage will be able to sell the car and will have a fast charger. That's the plan.
There's quite a lot of infrastructure being put up in the northeast. Do you remember when we went to the Royal Society of Engineers or Engineering? I can't remember which one it was. They were talking about this project that's just been set in place there, not only because the car was to be built not that far away, but because of the way that cars are used in that part of the world. It's a really good model for how people use cars in Britain. It's a fairly accurate model, you know.
How did you find living with it? You had it for a week?
No, I didn't. I just drove it for a few hours and
Didn't really
I
get a
just
chance to sort of
no. I mean, that's the thing.
find
It feels
what
like
it's like to live
a
with it, but-
5-door hatchback. I wish it looked more radical, or they just called it quits and just looked like a normal car. It's almost like they've bottled out of made. It's just not very attractive as a result.
Well, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, it's bland. It's a bit of round,
Yeah, it's
anodyne
not
sort of
great.
front, and it's a bit sort of goldfish.
Doesn't have much character. doesn't
But
it?
today I was looking at the Nissan website, and I was looking at that car in the context of all the other cars that Nissan are making at the moment. And you look at it, and it fits somewhere in terms of styling in between the Duke and the Micra, which both have these quite high headlamps way up on the
Yeah.
top of the bonnet, which is a weird thing.
Well, here's the thing. I think we find cars like this interesting because they obviously have some potential. I was thinking about what I do with my car a lot, which is I just drive across London in it.
Yeah.
And I'll do a 16-mile round trip to the BBC and back. And, well, you could do that in an electric car. You wouldn't have range anxiety there. And what you've got is a fairly comfortable, normal car. I mean, almost its normality is a bit of a downfall.
disappointment. Well, this
Yeah,
is what
well,
we
no,
said about the Tesla as well. It
it's
was just a
absolutely
car,
true.
wasn't it? When we drove the
Yeah.
Tesla, it's just a great car.
But I mean, on the plus side-
and it's absolutely true that a lot of the fuss that people make about the range of electric cars, it's not relevant to a lot of people's everyday use of the car.
No, there's all these stats. I mean, they're saying that people in Britain, the average journey is of a matter of like 8 miles or something. I've got this written down here, and now I can't find it. Anyway, that's not the
Although
point.
if 1 in 10 of your journeys is a 200-mile
Well, that's the thing.
journey,
It's always the
then it
potential that
does-
you could just go. Someone goes,
that
"Oh my
is
God,
it.
you know, your great aunt is on her deathbed. Quick, get up to Aberdeen." You could in a normal car. And I'll just tell you two things that are interesting about you saying about the high headlights. Now, there's a reason why the headlights are not only high, but why they're shaped the way they are. They're part of a careful aerodynamic package that directs wind past the door mirrors, because when you take away engine noise, particularly at medium speeds, suddenly you're acutely aware of other things, like wind noise. So they've had to try and minimise wind noise. So it is a very quiet car, which is interesting, and the tyres are the noisiest part of it by a mile. But the other thing, this is brilliant, Nissan have a generic wiper motor that they use in all their cars. But when they fitted it to the Leaf prototypes, they found it was too noisy. You were so aware of this.
Like a 1960s Land Rover.
Because everything else was quiet. Yeah, exactly. So they've had to develop a special wiper motor for it. And that, it is, the quietness and the fact that actually it just has this limitless, or feels like limitless torque from zero, it just pulls. And it's actually sort of deceptively quick. So in that way, it is actually quite amusing to drive. But I sort of wish they'd gone a bit all out on making it a bit more not amusing to drive per se, because most people don't care about that, but just make it a bit more radical, because early adopters are going to be the people who buy this one.
I spoke to Nigel, my sort of adoptive brother, foster brother, who lives in San Francisco now, and he asked me, Nissan Leaf or Chevy Volt, what should I get? And I said, no competition. If your commute is less than 50 miles, go for the electric car. There will be benefits in terms of tax and parking and economy in the States if you do that. You don't need that range extender ability. You're always going to have a second car. So the logic of that car, even though I think it looks bland to me, I think it will probably sell well. It's expensive though, isn't it? Was it 20?
Well, there's a £5,000.
I mean, there is a logic to making the car look, ordinary and not particularly radical,
well, I think
because
that's
you
what
want
they've
to.
done. They've deliberately done that.
I think.
Yeah, it's basically 26 grand with a £5,000 government grant. It'll get cheaper by the time we start making it in Britain in 2 years' time. They want to get the price down to about 17 grand, so it costs as much as a hatchback of that sort. I've just looked it up. 109 miles is the official government
There you
range.
go.
So
there you go.
it's not amazing, but they say that 95% of all journeys in the UK are less than 25 miles. So go figure.
It's over-engineered.
But again, if Great Aunt Gladys is ill in Aberdeen, get the train.
You're all going to have to like me now better
We like
than
you
the
anyway.
Formula One, because I've got pizza.
That has been eagle-eared of you will have heard the doorbell go and the pizza arrive during that. So we're going to eat, and we'll be back with something we've not really ever talked about before on this programme. Ladies and gentlemen, with details of the FIA's new electric race car series, please welcome on stage Monsieur Jean-Tot.
Hello. I'm delighted to be able to reveal exclusively to you one of the cars that will be taking part in our new electric racing car series. It is here under this handkerchief. Voila!
Oh, that's just a scale model. Where's the real thing?
No, this is it. This is one of the cars you will see in the FIA's 2013 Scale Electric Series.
What?
And now please welcome one of the drivers for the series. This is Jamie.
Hello.
He is 7.
This is rubbish!
I said to you all what I recently said to Bernie. Sod off.
Yes, Central! Return Jones speed!
I said at the top of the show that we would be boldly going where this programme hasn't gone before. Gareth Jones on Speed is usually about cars. Well, actually, it's usually about Apple technology and occasionally about electro music of the 1980s as well. But we mostly talk about cars. But for a very good reason, I want to spend the next few minutes on this programme not talking about cars, but talking about space. Because April the 12th, 1961, 50 years ago to the day, if you're listening to this show on April the 12th, was the dawn of manned spaceflight. Yuri Gagarin made the first manned flight into orbit. It was up there for about an hour and a half, but it was a breakthrough moment. As someone who was born in 1961, I'm the same age as the space age, unless you count people who were born in 57 when Sputnik went up. But I am so motivated to talk about this great anniversary that I want to have a few minutes talking about space on this programme, because I believe that the people who listen to this programme would be interested in space. Richard, you're interested in space, aren't you? You don't follow it religiously, but you're a fan. You like shuttle stuff, don't you?
I'm interested in space, yes. I find it quite mind-boggling that it's 50 years, because we're not doing it so much anymore.
And there is
a thing, and yet we have, I presume, much greater computing power, apart from anything else, to be able to work out this stuff. And the physics involved in space, and I know this because of being friends with you two, because you do know this stuff. It is incomprehensible how difficult it is to make something leave the Earth. I mean, a plane can sort of go into the sky, but we're talking about beyond the sky in simple terms, aren't we? We're talking about leaving the Earth's gravitational pull, which is incredible. Sorry, but now I'm just whimsying about
getting out of the
basics.
atmosphere it's hugely more difficult than making a plane fly.
50 years ago, we got a man into space.
But the even more incredible thing...
It's hard to comprehend that.
The really incredible thing, though, in a way, is how quickly we did it after man first flew. If you think about when the Wright brothers made their first flight, which was what?
1903, was it?
About 50 years after that happened, we got a man into space.
Well, we didn't. Most people didn't have a telephone in their house, and we didn't have colour television. The notion that you could carry with you a tiny little box that would play music into your ears and enable you to speak to someone else directly at the push of a button or two would have been the stuff of witchcraft, and yet we enabled a man to leave the Earth's atmosphere and orbit around it.
And here's the nice thing. You say we, right? Yuri Gagarin was...
Speaking on behalf of mankind.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But
so that's the point. That's
like,
the beauty of space travel. Yuri Gagarin, the greatest moment in the history of the Soviet Empire, the greatest hero of the Soviet Empire. He did more good for the Soviet Empire and ultimately prevented the Third World War, because the space race, the moon race, was the Third World War, fought between the two superpowers of the Soviet Union and the United States of America, but fought in outer space. Rather than firing rockets at each other to destroy each other in mutually assured destruction, they decided to play, right lads, on the table, and my lifters are bigger than yours. It forced Kennedy, because America was so behind, because Russia had had the first dog in space, the first mice in space, the first satellite, the first manned space flight. America had to set the goals much higher, the moon, in order to play catch-up.
In terms of manned spaceflight, yes, absolutely, although there is an interesting aspect to the early space race that doesn't get quite so much attention, understandably, which is that the Americans weren't quite so fussed about losing some of the manned rounds, if you like, because they were doing so much better at putting spy satellites into orbit, which they were doing much more quietly than the manned space effort. That's the thing, we're talking about the 50th anniversary of manned spaceflight, and as you say, both Gagarin's flight and the American moonshot, we all believe this, I think, that these things really unite people. They really kind of make you proud for mankind, and it's a great achievement for all mankind. It doesn't matter whether it's a Russian guy or an American guy or an American girl or whoever it is. These are extraordinary things that make everybody feel like you're a small person on a small planet and you're part of this enormous universe.
Spaceflight satisfies me at that level. The heroic Star Trekian leaving the planet is at least a continental objective.
We have an urge to explore, and we have an urge to understand our universe.
But it also satisfies me in the same way that Formula One satisfied me, not just as a technophile. I love the technology of the moon, how we achieved that moon landing. So much of the culture that came from NASA is in our lives now, not just the technology, but the culture of modular systems and backups and how you put together a big project. NASA sort of spearheaded that kind of thing. But it also satisfies me, like I was saying, like Formula One. If you watch a launch, I've never seen a live manned launch in the flesh. I've seen an Atlas put a satellite up from Canaveral, and that, I had tears in my eyes as this thing tore across the sky. It was wonderful. But because of Twitter these days, Twitter's the best thing that ever happened to the space age. I get live tweets, updates throughout the day.
From the NASA tweet up. They have these NASA tweet ups.
So I'm aware whenever a rocket goes up. This launches on a daily basis. So coming back to what you said, Richard, that we don't do it so much anymore. Yes, we are still putting up stuff ever more greater frequency than we did back in the 60s. But it's all commercial at the moment. They're putting satellites up.
Communication satellites and GPS
There's a
satellites.
thing you can find online, actually, which shows you using, I think, the fully zoomed out Google Earth, all the satellites that are up there. It's something like 14,000. Now, one of the things about getting a manned spacecraft up there now is that it must be like driving through the rush hour in downtown Manhattan. How do they not bang into things?
They do.
Listen, they do.
I thought even a flake of paint could hold a shuttle windscreen.
Well,
two things.
To it is.
Yeah, but two things. In the last week, they did a little manoeuvre with the International Space Station to move it out of the way of debris that they knew was heading its way from a collision that had taken place between two satellites a couple of years before. Very small things, even a screw, a fleck of paint can cause damage. But they did some tests on, I believe, the debris that had adhered to mere solar panels. Basically, after a certain time in orbit, the solar panels weren't working as effectively. They'd picked up a lot of crud, a lot of dirt which was making less efficient, less lights getting onto the panels. Turned out that most of the crud on the solar panels was human excrement. It was
What?
It was the same, literally, crap that had been jettisoned from Mir during its time in orbit. Because if you think about it,
It's in the same orbit. It's going to stay.
No.
yeah, it's when you chuck it out of
So
Mir,
the Earth
it
is
stays in
lightly
more.
ringed by a sort of
a ring.
a halo of astronaut poo.
Yes, but it's okay because any of it that's returning to Earth is going to burn up quite safely. Nothing
Yeah,
to
I'm
worry
not really worried about that.
But if you're
I do feel slightly guilty because when I was a kid, I seem to remember once firing a bottle rocket, and it went really high, and we never saw where it came down. I'm a bit concerned it may be banging into the International Space Station as we speak because it was
bouncing
really
off all the big
powerful.
turds.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about space. Space is, as they
Really
say, space is big. Yes, you might think that going down to the shops is a long way. That's nothing to space. Space is big.
Fair
Have you
enough. I think it was a long way to Italy if I had to walk it. I mean,
have you ever been outside of London? I know that you have, but if you meet people who live just on the outside of the M25, there's huge volumes of space there because it radiates, because of the maths of it. There's a lot more space out there than there is in central London. So a lot of space, and space is the same as well. I know we've got a lot of stuff sharing more or less the same orbit. But that's a huge amount of space up there.
And on the plus side, none of it has Reading in it, so that's much nicer than the space around London.
But the problem is that all of that extra space out there, it isn't anything like as much use as the space that's already crowded with debris, with dead satellites, with the remains of satellites that have bumped into each other, flecks of paint, discarded gloves, tools, astronauts. But because basically the useful orbital locations are low Earth orbit. There's a lot of crap floating around there, and geostationary orbit. And there's only so much space in the geostationary orbital slots.
But is it possible, therefore, that if aliens attempted to land on Earth, which of course we know could happen because I've seen films about it, that actually we've inadvertently protected our planet by surrounding it with this miasma of crap?
We've got to get through it.
No chance at all. I think it's a pretty safe bet that if they can make it from Alpha Centauri to
They
here,
go, all right, we'll just dodge round that old B Sky B satellite, and we'll.
It would be like you
we'll
sort of
land
pulling
on
up to
Reading. Result.
It would be like you were pulling up to a parking spot and sort of seeing
Sorry if you
somebody
live in
put a
Reading, by the way.
little kind of cone in the way. You go,
Well, generally,
I'll just
sorry
move the
for
cone out of the
people
way and I'll just park there anyway.
Sorry, sir. Okay, we're talking about what they call, is it level 2 civilizations who are able to harness enough power to leave their own solar system, right?
Yeah, there is this sort of
Well, let's
classification.
introduce
the ones
our
that are
own.
really dangerous are the level 42 civilizations because they land on your Earth and they play slap bass until you just want to kill yourself.
Somehow I knew that was coming.
You saw it coming from the other side of the
light years
galaxy.
away.
basically.
If they've got the technology to do interstellar stuff, then they'll get through our crap layer around Earth.
I think
won't they?
so, yeah.
I just want to say a couple of things before we wrap this, because we talked far too long in this programme about all sorts of daft stuff. No change there. I'm thrilled to bits that it's the 50th anniversary. Congratulations to the Soviets.
Well done, everyone who's done anything to space.
And in the meantime, everyone, yeah. Please mark it by watching a movie called First Orbit that's just been made by Chris Riley, who I know vaguely, and it's worth seeing. It's using footage shot from the ISS.
I was reading about and they had to tell the astronauts on the ISS exactly when to film,
What time of the day.
so that they got the same view.
They basically
as
recreated
Gagarin.
Gagarin's view, and they used his original voice recordings of his communications with Earth with the translation. It's really wonderful. It's really, really wonderful.
And on sorts of films, I think The Right Stuff, best space movie ever.
No,
Fantastic
For All
film.
Mankind is the best space movie ever, but that's a whole other conversation.
Okay, For All Mankind, best non-fiction.
Yes,
Uh,
shot entirely on location
Yep.
in outer space.
Just 2 words for you, gentlemen, or maybe it's 1. I don't know. Spaceballs.
Oh dear, Pizza the Hut. Oh dear.
Best space comedy. Okay, we'll get
Comedy? It's a documentary, isn't it?
And the other thing is, look, do me a favour, I don't usually plug other websites, so go to spaceflightnow.com, follow their Twitter feed, and you can watch a live space launch, because a live launch, and I've seen loads recently, is like the start of an F1 race. You hold your breath. I've seen guys being sent up from Baikonur recently, live. I've never seen a Russian launch live before.
Biker
Thanks to the
Grove.
web.
They launched from Biker Grove.
But not Baikonur,
Amazing.
Baikonur.
Sweet. Also, sorry, I don't know much about space, but I just remembered something that if you on Twitter, there's a chap who's on the ISS at the moment.
Yes,
and he occasionally tweets. I was thinking, what's his address? I can't remember. You look it up.
His address, ISS,
Yes,
somewhere in orbit.
One space.
I'm following him, so follow me.
Yeah, and he just occasionally posts up pictures of parts of the Earth from space. And you can't say fairer than that for now. Every so often on your internet, that's quite good, isn't it?
Quite right, too. Richard, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Zog, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
You've listened to Gareth Jones on space, I suppose it was. If we were talking about stuff you didn't really care about, it didn't last that long, did it? But we might have to do this again soon with your permission. Say goodbye, fellas.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site or follow us on Twitter, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!